welcome to Frontier Opening Bell. I'm Temple Ashaju. We've got Luke Otfojebe joining us from Vetiva Capital Management on the show this morning. Ali Kansaju coming in from Nairobi, Kenya, and Bosun Omofaye based in Lagos, representing us here as well on Frontier Africa Reports. Let's start off with the markets. Nigeria's markets, the Nigerian Stock Exchange was lower yesterday by 81 basis points. On Thursday, still, BRVM Stock Exchange in Ivory Coast was 33 basis points decline. The Egyptian Stock Exchange in Cairo was positive by some 0.72%. Kenya, where we have Nairobi Stock Exchange, was positive by 0.48%. We'll look at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, where the market was positive as well by 0.39%. The Eastern African headlines now. We've got Kenya's private sector PMI sinking to 41.5 reading in April versus 50.6 in March. KNSE is to launch unquoted securities platform on May the 12th. Aecon Limited is to redeem 777 million Kenyan shillings under the 5 billion shillings mid-term program. Stanchart Kenya chairman Patrick Obath exits board on by the end of this month, May ending. KCB, that's Kenya Commercial Bank Group, wants approval to buy Bank ABC Tanzania Limited. Uganda seeks $900 million 3-year IMF loan package from that multilateral bank. Let's bring these headlines to you for analysis, Ali.
Yes, good morning all, and thank you for having me. Let me just go sequentially through your headlines. The PMI sinking to 41.5. That's a very poor print. Bit of a sticker shock. Below 50, obviously, on contractionary mode. 41.5 is a long way below 50. This is all related to the curfew that was imposed in order to slow down the rate of COVID infections, which peaked with a test positivity rate above 20% and are currently back below 10. So that's a positive signal, and one hopes that we'll see a rebound from there. We've had some relaxation. This curfew basically covered 5 counties, including Nairobi, and essentially about 65% of Kenya's GDP, and therefore you've seen that reflection in the PMI number. The IMF, who were extremely bullish about Kenya GDP, they predicted at 7%, as bullish as they were about India, where they had something like 10%. And I don't know what's happening at the in that department, but they're so way off base, I think, both in Kenya's case and in India's case. And they will be revising them lower, I suspect. It's not possible now. We're already into May for Kenya to hit those sorts of numbers, and India similarly, as you can see what is happening. The KNSE to launch an unquoted securities platform. Look, I mean, they've been very innovative. They've created multiple new platforms, but the main issue is in the quality that is coming to these platforms. And I was looking through these Nairobi All Share, it's hitting a 2-year high, but this is fundamentally a story about one stock, Safaricom. If you strip out Safaricom, we're at 10-year lows on the stock exchange. And therefore, I think, you know, the stock exchange has also got to do some introspection and work out how exactly they're going to go about reinvigorating the market beyond creating the new architecture. They need to now push good companies through it. They need to get back to that period we had under President Kibaki when they were listing the parastatals and create that feel-good factor again, and that virtuous circle of bringing poorly managed parastatals into the private sector, improving the management, improving the bottom line, and it tends to be a positive feedback loop, but they've seemed to have forgotten about that. Acorn, interesting company. In this case, it's an early redemption of a medium-term note program, which informs us that rates have gone lower, and Acorn is doing some smart treasury footwork here, and basically thinking to themselves, we can refinance and save a bunch of cash. It caught a lot of people off guard, I think. Standard Chartered, Mr. Obath, very iconic figure here in Kenya. from the oil and gas sector. I think he's spent his 2 terms at Stanchart, and that's all that information is. KCB wanting approval to buy Bank ABC Tanzania. This goes back to the strategy, I think, of buying small operations in country, beefing them up or consolidating them. Bank ABC was part of the Bob Diamond dream of setting up a Pan-African bank. That came to the market with an IPO, I think, at $10 a share, and is now worth about 30 US cents. Unfortunately, Africa, as we all know, is a lot more complicated than sometimes it says on the label. And your final headline, Uganda seeking $900 million from the IMF. Again, this also caught me off guard because I thought they had this under control. But obviously, the economy, notwithstanding the fact it's done better than many others, has a shortfall. And the good thing with the IMF, I suppose, is you get some kind of oversight into the frame. And for international investors, it's typically a stamp of approval, and it would allow Uganda, for example, probably to do a Eurobond if they saw fit under cover of that IMF program.
Thank you very much, Ali. The thinking will then be that it was just last year that Uganda secured $495 million from the IMF, and now they are back on the track again to secure another loan, $900 million at this point in time. How sustainable will this debt be for them?
So, there have been issues around sustainability. Kenya is a bit more extreme when you look at the continuum. The concerns are higher, but the concerns remain that, debt service is where everyone's looking and saying, look, if you look at your income and you look at the amount you need to service, it's not making sense. You're spending way too much on debt service. So I think the good thing about the IMF is that, they've been pretty good about the interest rates they're charging. And the problem is all our countries typically went and borrowed willy-nilly at very high interest rates, commercial loans. The Chinese are not cheap lenders either. And what we found is, they've maxed out on that credit card. And the good thing about the IMF is allowing them to restructure the balance sheets and get better control over the interest payments they're having to make on a year-to-year basis. Uganda's economy, of course, everyone's looking forward to 2025, when Total are predicting the oil will come on stream. I saw a recent report about the pipeline that, they're finding it difficult to finance that pipeline. BNP Paribas, I believe, were expected to finance it, but seem to have taken a step back. But I think ultimately, I can't see them failing to get the pipeline financed. I think Total will sit on some heads and get it sorted out, and I'm sure a French bank will come forward. So, I think the Uganda story looks okay to me in the medium term. The political aspect, they went through a very difficult election, a very, very hard line approach to the opposition remains a challenge. And I think, the political risk remains quite high.
Thank you so much, Ali. Bosun, any quick contributions before we move to the Western African headlines?
Well, I think I'll just speak very briefly, a few seconds, to what Ali talked about, the Kenya Nairobi Securities Exchange getting a new unquoted securities platform. It's not about getting new platforms, but getting big listings, the kind of companies that he talked about, the SOEs. And that speaks to the Nigerian Exchange Limited, formerly Nigerian Stock Exchange as well. Look, it's not about some of these recreating new platforms and what have you, but you need good listings. The Chinese are doing it. It's happening in the western part of the world, in the United States. We need to bring more companies for listing. We need to get state-owned enterprises, wherever way they can convince the government or the authorities. I know the Egyptians have suspended their the plans to list those SOEs. Ghana was making some of those plans. We talked about that last year. We're not sure what is happening this year. I know there are a lot of political considerations when it comes to state-owned enterprises in Africa. So it's going to be a little bit tough, but we need these big listings and not just recreating new platforms. And what of you? Again, you're dealing with about how many companies do you trade on a daily basis on the Nigerian exchange as well? And Luke knows, typically it's like about 20, 25 companies on a daily basis. Gainers and losers, you can repeat them on your 10 fingers.
Thank you very much, boss. And this takes us now to the Western African and Nigerian markets headlines, where Moody's places First Bank ratings on review for downgrade. Access, Zenith, Attijariwafa Bank, eyeing Atlas Mara's 49.97% stake in Union Bank, says a report from Bloomberg yesterday. MTN Nigeria completes Series 1 7-year fixed rate bond issuance. Buhari removes Nigerian Ports Authority Managing Director Hadiza Usman. Onatel's first quarter net income was profitable, up by 4.5% to 7.97 billion CFA franc in the first quarter of this year. Diamonds Atlas Mara says to get offers for Africa assets. I'm not sure there's any point in time throughout this week that we didn't have a headline relating to First Bank. Luke, I'm sure you help us to break that down.
So good morning, everyone. So for First Bank, I think what Moody's is just trying to say is that there might likely be a negative rating on the bank by the time they are concluded with their ratings on several banks in Nigeria. And for First Bank, really, I mean, it's a bit surprising when you look at, the industry trend we've noticed in the last 5 years, especially for First Bank, where we've seen the bank, come up with strict risk management framework in terms of managing its credit losses, the issuing of new loans to corporates and the likes. But on the flip side, it's not surprising that we've been hearing things like the bank being involved in third-party related loans. I mean, and one of those just came out recently, the one that has to do with First Bank granting loans that were not well analyzed, not well looked into before being granted to Honeywell, which is a company related to First Bank by means of ownership, because I mean one of the major shareholders we have in First Bank is the owner of Honeywell. So because of things like this, we've been seeing cases of companies, the company not being able to manage its loans effectively. So I guess that's what Moody's rating is solely based on. So going forward, given the fact that CBN has taken a strict measure in terms of sanitizing the board of the bank, we do believe that we might see better risk management framework for the bank, and that can actually help to stimulate positive rating when next a rating agency is about to rate the bank.
Thank you so much. How much do we now know about Access Zenith Bank's interest in Union Bank stake?
So since 2014, Union Bank has been trying to rebrand. I mean, it was one of those banks that were struggling after the consolidation of banks during Solido's era. So it was actually one of those banks struggling then. But since 2014, we've seen the bank on a very good footing, and that's because of the injection of funds from equity funds. And for equity funds providers, they are usually very concerned about the board, the management of the bank, how funds are utilized. So they really want to be sure that everything is run efficiently. And so since then, we've seen like an improvement in Union Bank's operations. Even in terms of profitability, there has been a significant improvement, although not compared to the likes of Access, Zenith Bank or GT Bank, but we've seen like a significant improvement. And since then, we've been seeing attention from the tier one banks like Access Bank, Zenith Banks. This has been in the news for a long period of time now that they are really showing interest in acquiring the bank. So it's really up to the equity funders in the bank if they are now willing to sell their stakes to Zenith Bank or any other bank. So that's a story that is still developing, and we are still.
Okay, then look, Looks like your connection is freezing, but thank you so much for those contributions. Before I come to you, Bosin, let me quickly hear your thoughts on Bob Diamond stakes for sale in Union Bank, Ali. What are your thoughts? Because it looks like you touched on that earlier.
Yes, I actually worked for Mr. Diamond many years ago at Credit Suisse Boston. He's a very dynamic character. His understanding of the markets and his risk-taking ability I never found again in my life. So he is a very iconic character. I think when I look back at it, Africa, you look at Africa and you think, oh, this is going to be Asia all over again. It's going to be that sort of story and it'll be linear. But Africa is extremely non-linear. It's extremely fragmented, and building out a Pan-African bank is no easy thing. We're increasingly seeing people who've successfully seemed to have done that. James Mwangi is one, amongst others. But I think it was a struggle to do what Mr. Diamond set out to do. And I think now we're seeing the divestment of that business, and essentially people have picked up the pieces. The most attractive component is that stake in the Nigerian bank, I would have thought. That must be the most valuable one. But definitely there was no scale within the network. So it's disappointing. I think he's returned to the United Kingdom, Pan Gordon, and so forth. A very iconic character, and probably did not get together with the right bankers. I mean, he teamed up with entrepreneurs rather than bankers, and it's a difficult market, the African banking market.
Thank you so much for those contributions, Ali. Bosun, your backstory is on all of these headlines here. One of the very significant one here is that of the NPA Managing Director, Attijariwafa.
Yes, that's quite a very story that just came out of the blues to hit everyone between the eyes overnight. Usman has proved to be, at least to all intents and purposes, and from what you read in the newspapers and the media over the last many years, she's been in charge of the MP, a woman who is dedicated and devoted. She's a good interview person, but she hardly seeks media attention. Very quiet on every front. You hardly hear any news about her at all, except when she's dealing with issues relating to Nigerian Post Authority. Now, based on what we know overnight was that the Ministry of Transportation under Rotimi Amici is conducting some inquiry into what's called irregularities, very vague as we speak at the moment. They're able to convince President Buhari that she should step aside from the NPA, which has been well run to all intents and purposes. You can see that over the past many years. This is a woman who's all boots on the ground and doing her job and hardly get into political phrase or whatever. But somewhere along the line, I guess there have been some issues that needs to be resolved. Perhaps there are a few folks who are unhappy with the e-calling, the e-trucking system, which she recently put in place a couple of weeks ago, I think a month ago or so, for calling up of haulage trucks into the Lagos ports and all of that. This is the first time you have an electronic system that call up haulage trucks into the ports, in and out of the port, trying to sanitize that very messy and chaotic situation we've had on our hands for years and for decades. But perhaps that's where this is coming from. We don't know. The press statement from the office of Mr. President was vague as to what specific irregularities is being the Ministry of Transportation is conducting in Nigerian Post Authority. She held the Port Authority down very well last year when we had the NSAS, and part of the building from our headquarters in Lagos, downtown Marina, was partly burnt and all of that. She went on very well. She got everybody on board. She's been a technocrat and a very technical person when it comes to managing that particular agency. She's among the iconic women you found in Buhari's administration when you talk about managing the offices like Yewande Sadiku of the NIPC, the woman in charge of REA, which is the Rural Electrification Agency, and a few others as well. So this is quite interesting, and I'm sure the jury is out there to see what the Rotimi Amici Ministry of Inquiry will be bringing out, what the allegations are, what the facts are, and then we'll have days and weeks ahead to digest all of that. And all this will still come back to the table of Mr. President, by the way.
And at the end of the day, we'll see what happens to the leadership of the NPA, which has never been off the table when it comes to controversies over the years. Let's move on to the Southern.
She's managed to handle it better.
Yeah, she did. I mean, but then again, here she is. She's been taking off the affairs again. I mean, for how long are we going to continue to see things like this? That's the concern.
NPA is like Nigerian NNPC. You and I know that. Luke Ofojebe also know that. The NPA is like the NNPC is for the NPA is for the big boys. Let's leave it there for today.
Thank you. Southern African headlines. We've got Thungela Resources planning a JSE LSE, that's Johannesburg Stock Exchange and London Stock Exchange listing after the merger. Michel Doukaris becomes AbInBev CEO with effect from July the 1st. The Botswana Stock Exchange, we got this story coming out of there. Lucara gets $220 million senior secured project funding for Karowe mine. Total starts production from Zinia phase 2 in Angola. Zambia denies Bloomberg's report of Konkola copper mine shutter as prices hit $10,000. We'll start with you on the in terms of reaction to these headlines, Ali.
So let me take them back to front. The Zambian headline was the one that caught my attention. You know, copper prices are at decade high levels, across $10,000. You would have thought it's a no-brainer. Having wrestled this mine back from the Indian entrepreneur of Vedanta, that you would be looking to, you know, make sure it's on track, making the investment that's required, and selling the copper for what is a very elevated price. However, you've got an election coming up in August. President Lungu is keen to win. You've had an enormous harvest, you know, there are a whole bunch of farmers that you're better off making happy by buying their harvest, probably at a little bit of an elevated price, keeping food prices under control in an environment where food prices have risen 30% in the last year, according to the FAO. So I think you've got scarce resources. I think there was about $1.3 billion of FX reserves in January. You're trying to preserve that. You're not going to do a deal with the IMF, because if you do, they'll bring in conditions which will make it more difficult for you to win the election. So you're going to hold those guys off, you know, spin a good story until after the election, when then you'll sit down and get serious. But you've got a limited amount of spending power. And I think that money is being spent on buying the harvest. And therefore, you know, I think the Zambian government might be denying the report, but essentially have not got the liquidity to put to work to get that mine back on track. I read the comments of the minister, and he said, look, you know, the mine's not going to run away. You know, we'll get it out of the ground soon enough. So I think, you know, they're betting that the price stays on a roll, which it is, and they're betting that they can get this going after August, after winning the election, where a lot of happy farmers are going to vote for the Patriotic Front, I imagine. Just to quickly touch on Total in Angola, that's a positive step for the president there, who's been making headway. It's interesting in the context that Total called a force majeure in Mozambique on the other side of the continent. So I think that's also a positive step for Angola.
Many thanks, Ali, for these comments there. Luke, you've got Michel Doukaris becoming the CEO of the AbInBev, and this is a company that has an extension in Nigeria listed on the Nigerian exchange. How much can we expect from him?
So on an individual basis, I can't really say how much we should expect from him. But looking at the entire corporate culture we have at AbInBev, you know that is an aggressive one. So any market that they find themselves in, they are usually very competitive. They usually come up with, you know, aggressive means to promote sales, and we've seen that play out in the Nigerian market as well, in the brewery space. You know, we've seen their pricing competition, you know, cutting their prices significantly in order to boost sales, and we've seen that, you know, manifesting their financial results. We've seen, like, you know, significant growth in their turnover over the past 2 to 3 years. However, the company is yet to report profits for any full year so far, and that's because of their high spend on advertisements and other promotional means of boosting their sales. For now, we might continue to see that trend because the company is still more focused on how it can actually gain market share, how it can steal market shares from the likes of Guinness and Nigerian breweries. And we will see that play out for some time before they start focusing more on profitability.
Thank you very much, Luke, for these contributions. Let's move on to the Northern African headlines, where Egypt is planning an offering in connection with KSA by the end of the month. Egypt also got the EG Bank standalone profits is up by 2%. Arabia Investments Holdings names Hezem Mustafa as the chief executive officer. We understand that GlaxoSmithKline Egypt shareholders are now mulling a potential mergers and acquisition with Amal Pharmaceuticals. Attijariwafa Bank of Morocco's got its profits rising by more than 21% to 1.3 billion dinars in the first quarter of this year. You have Credit du Maroc planning to issue 1 billion dirhams bond. Bosun, let's start with you before we get the final thoughts of Ali.
Thank you. Well, the most interesting story for me is the energy project or plan between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. For me, that's quite a very unique proposition by Egypt, asking for tenders, for financial tenders involving electricity partnership with Saudi Arabia. Look, Egypt will sit up there and they will take the rest of the African continent to the cleaners, by the way, if you allow President Al-Sisi. Very ambitious president. And this is good. Again, look, make all the friends you can, establish yourself as a regional and an international game player. That is all we're asking for. So if you ask me in Nigeria, for example, what are we asking for from look, President Buhari is talking about building a pipeline between Nigeria and Morocco. Can we get it happen? We've had a lot of talks. Do we want to dredge the Atlantic Ocean all the way to Morocco or to Chad? I don't mind. Can we get the boots on the ground and get it running? I'm sure Ali's getting into the boot already. So congratulations to Egypt and Saudi Arabia.
Thank you so much. Thanks a great deal, Bosun. Ali, your final thoughts before we draw the curtain.
I'll just add to what Bosun's saying. I mean, look, this is the difference between success and failure. This man in Egypt is doing what he's saying. You can imagine that he's going to plug in 110 million people into Saudi Arabia. It's a great market for those guys. Plus, he's going to get a whole lot of cheap energy to fire up the Egyptian economy. And we talk the talk, but we don't walk it. This man talks the talk and he walks it. And for that, he gets a lot of financial backing from every corner of the globe. There's a lesson to be learned here.
Many thanks, Ali. You and Bosun have a way of marketing the northern part of Africa, especially Egypt. And so I think President Al-Sisi should make some commissions.
Luke will agree with you. Luke will agree with you. I know. Luke will agree with you. This is an investment. Luke is an investment guy. Ali is an investment guy. They go to where the money is.
Absolutely.
You can't just be talking without walking the talk.
You both deserve commissions from Egypt, from President Al-Sisi. Many thanks for your comments on the show today. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. Ali Kansaju, the founder of Rich Frontiers Management in Nairobi, Kenya. Thanks a great deal. Luke Ofojebe joined us from Vetiver Capital Management. Thanks a great deal for sharing your insight. Bosun Omofaye appreciates your editorial considerations on the show this morning. I am Temple Ashaju. Thank you for being a part of the show. Frontier Opening Bell. Hope this helps you to make very profitable decisions as it trades today. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.